Number 6, Local Control, Accountability and Advisory Committee, or what we call LCAAC.
Recording in progress.
That's next. So just a reminder that we will be recording. And Letty, do you know if everything's technically all set?
Yes, I see Mr. Zamora there, and Mr. Zamora, we're ready to go live if we haven't already. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next we're going to do attendance. Mr. Secretary, will you be able to take attendance this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize you, Stephen Musto.
Here.
Tammy
Recording
Solis.
stopped.
The recording has stopped.
Should we wait?
No, why don't you go ahead and I will look offline while you're doing
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Tammy Solis. Vicky Chon.
I am here representing Vicky Chon. I'm Stacy Kalimlam.
I think I received an email about it. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you.
Anika Jain.
Present.
Sisi Zhang.
Here.
Gabriela Munoz.
Señora Munoz?
Gabriela?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. I mark you as present, okay? Thank you. Harpreet Kaur. Prakash Dasot. Anna Schipper.
Here.
Thank you, Anna. Siddhartha Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee?
I see in the chat that he is having some audio problems and he will rejoin, but he is here.
Right. Thank you. I see. Anjanette Pelletier.
Here.
Hi. Christy Rocha.
She is out ill.
And I see you, Leticia Salinas. Hi. Thank you for organizing this meeting. Daniel Hillman.
Present.
And Trustee Jones.
Here.
Thank you. And then I recognize, there was one name I did not recognize, but I think that person dropped off. Well,
And Mr. Secretary, Ms. Claudia Escobedo is here doing concurrent translation for one of our members.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I should probably note, I'm going to do that later. I think we have 8 voting members present, Mr. Chair, and that concludes the roll.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll look at the agenda and get approval for the agenda for this evening. It has been posted, and that it'd be good is to share it in the chat as well. Are there any questions about the agenda or anything we should note or a note about it? Ms. Salinas?
Just a note that for item number 7, we are still waiting for information from legal counsel as to whether or not we would be required to come back in person. So I would respectfully ask to move that item to the next meeting.
All right. Any other thoughts on the agenda? Well, could someone as a voting member make a motion and consider the suggestion of Ms. Salinas to remove item 7?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the agenda with the amendment of removal of item 7 to the next agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Schipper seconds.
Thank you very much. Are there any oppositions to this change, to this adoption? Seeing or hearing none, I think we'll say that's approved. Next, we will discuss the minutes from our November meeting, November 1st. If you could please look at that, or hopefully you've reviewed it already. and then we can take a motion on that as well.
I reviewed them earlier, so I'll move that we approve the minutes as written. I see no changes to be made.
Thank you
Angela
very much.
Pelletier.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was reading the minutes.
Mhm.
Who moved, please?
That was Ms. Pelletier.
Oh, thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
Sorry, one really quick point. I think my name is spelled incorrectly on, it's not a big deal, but
No, it is.
it's spelled with an I instead of a Y at the end.
And which page is that?
Every time my name is mentioned, I think.
Oh, I see. Yes.
I will correct that. It's my apologies. I'm from Germany, and Sissy is a very popular name in both Austria and Germany, and I got ahead of myself. I apologize. I'll try to do better next time.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
And I'm happy to amend my motion to include the correction of the spelling.
Thank you very much. Can we get a second?
Anna Shipper, second.
Thank you very much. Are there any oppositions to the approval or any edits that need to be made? All right, then we will consider those approved. Next, we are up for public comment. Ms. Salinas, are we open for that now, or do we have to wait for a certain time?
No, we are open for that now, and I would recommend that I will keep monitoring, and we are live streaming. So if anyone comes into the meeting room, I will let them in. But at this point, there are no public comments.
Also, Mr. Lechner, I believe one of our other members joined, Ms. Solis. So we might want to note that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Solis. I recognize you as present.
Okay, next is the selection of the chair and the secretary. So if you recall last meeting, we successfully found co-vice chairs. And I believe this meeting, we're going to be electing a chair for the remainder of this year and the secretary. I've, of course, served last year and last meeting as the chair, and Mr. Lechner has served very ably as their secretary. Please let me know or let us know if you're interested in either of those positions. Don't jump off everybody. All right. Mr. Lechner, go ahead.
I just want to say that, I volunteer quite a bit. I'm also a library commissioner for the city of Fremont, and being the secretary of this committee is a unique privilege and a very enjoyable activity. I've had great exposure to our chair, Mr. Musto, and also other high-ranking staff at the district. So if anybody feels interested in the role, you should not hesitate. It really isn't all that much work. You have to keep the minutes, but I would encourage everybody should have an opportunity to serve. So if you are interested, please go ahead
and along those lines, I will say I've enjoyed serving. This is a great group. I really like that we can have so much direction on positive nature of our district within this group and all the things we've helped contribute. So I'm happy to continue in any role as well.
Sorry, I have a question on behalf of Ms. Gabriela. So she wants to know a little bit more detail in regards to being a chair.
Okay. Essentially, it's the facilitator of this meeting. In my experience, I've worked with Letty on helping form the agenda. But for the most part, we're just kind of going over and making sure all bylaws are followed procedurally. Democracy. Okay, so anybody want to? I would be happy to serve again if no one is serve as chair. If no one is interested, last call, please. Oh, yes.
Does this committee require us to nominate you and or Mr. Lechner to continue in your positions?
I believe so, but go ahead. Go ahead, Letty. Oh, I was going to note that Claudia, can you go ahead?
So Gabriela is interested in being chair.
Oh, okay. All right. What about so we've got, I think I nominated myself to be chair and Gabriella. And what about secretary? Mr. Lechner, are you interested in serving again?
First of all, did somebody nominate you, Mr. Chair? If nobody did, then I'd be happy to nominate you also for chair.
Sorry, I think when I said I was interested, I was kind of self-nominated, but
that's fine, and it's good to know that you're interested. But I think that for the
Yeah.
purposes of democracy, I'd be happy to provide the honor. It was a great privilege to work with you. It's a little sort of self-serving for me to say this as secretary, but I think you did a great job. And, but this means that you cannot nominate me now.
I see.
So I would be happy to serve again, but I would hopefully somebody might nominate me.
I move to nominate Mr. Lechner as secretary.
Thank you.
I
accept the nomination.
I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but last meeting we did a split vice chair between the two students, a couple of our student representatives, and I'm wondering if we'd be interested in that for the chair. Obviously, working in the district office, I have a unique perspective in being able to work on the agenda and things, but I'd be very interested in working with a parent as well in helping with that agenda. And I'm sure Letty would be able to work with, we'd all work together very well, I'm sure.
If she is open to that, I would be happy to nominate Ms. Gabriela Munoz along with Mr. Musto as co-chairs for the committee.
Yes.
All right. Well, so we have a nomination. Is there a second?
Anna Shipper seconds.
All right, we got Shipper, Stacy, and Cece. Any objections? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to work with Ms. Munoz, and Ms. Munoz, I'll reach out to you. Letty and I will reach out to you, and we'll set up a meeting shortly.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. All right. Next up, we're not doing item number 7. Yes.
Did we vote on Mr. Lechner's?
Oh my goodness, I apologize. I'm so self-centered. We also have a recommendation a nomination for Mr. Lechner. Do we have a second for that?
Tammy Solis gives a second.
Thank you so much. Are there any objections? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for that clarification, and congratulations, Mr. Lechner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we are skipping number 7, as mentioned earlier. Before we jump into our main presentation for the evening, are there any public comment that we should be noting, Ms. Salinas?
No, there's no one waiting to come in.
All right, we'd like to introduce the Director of Assessment and Accountability, Ellie Wasser, who's going to give us an update on the California dashboard. This is very relevant to the LCAAC, and they actually made some changes that are going to make it even more of a connection to the LCAAC. So I'm excited for you guys to see this presentation. And with that in mind, go ahead, Ellie.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so very much for the introduction and for the invitation to be here this evening. I have a presentation that I'll be kind of sharing my screen here and go through a couple of slides, but from my understanding, there are some return members on the committee as well as new members. So some of the information may be a bit foundational for veterans, but nonetheless, I think it's a good thing that we're all on the same page as we look for the release of this valuable accountability tool later this month. All right, so is it okay if I share my screen? All right, wonderful. So the dashboard was first implemented in 2017 in a hopes of having a more holistic view of school performance, one that doesn't necessarily focus on any one particular aspect of the many different bits that schools are responsible for in both the academic, social, emotional development of a child, their physical well-being at the site. And so earlier this year, you may have heard that SBAC results were to be released earlier. They were embargoed by the state for quite some time. Part of the reason for the state wanting to hold on to those academic measures was hoping to release them closer to the overall release of the dashboard, which paints a much larger picture or provides additional context for the performance of schools across multiple measures. Very specifically, it needs to be communicated that the dashboard allows for the analysis of data both at the school and district level, and then all the way down to these particular subgroups. So we're able to disaggregate data both by racial and ethnic groups, homeless and foster youth, as well as socioeconomically disadvantaged, and then students who are current English language learners, as well as students who are supported with special services, students with disabilities. There are 6 different state measures on the current iteration of the California School Dashboard. Academic performance is a joint measure that makes use of both SBAC summative performance on the English language arts and literacy and mathematics exams. Chronic absenteeism is a measure of how many students are chronically absent across the school year. That's defined by the state as students missing 10% or more of instruction for the school year. It's interesting to note that that indicator really tries to focus on the loss of instruction. So it makes no differentiation between those that are excused and unexcused absences. English learner progress is one of the indicators that is specific to our English learner student group. The graduation rate indicator is a measurement of how many students complete high school with a standard diploma, making use of both 4- and 5-year graduation cohort metrics. This is a measure of just standard diplomas. So there are other means of kind of exiting high school early, both with exams or certificates of completion. Those are not captured as positives within the graduation rate. And then suspension rate is a measure of how many students in a particular school or group have been suspended at least once. If the same student is suspended multiple times, they're only counted once. If the infraction was sufficient enough to receive multiple days of suspension for the same incident, again, that student is only counted as once. Just one other mention here about going back to academic performance. There are participation goals that the state sets for having at least 95% of eligible students take those exams. And there are associated penalties for either districts, schools, or student groups that don't meet that threshold. The college and career readiness indicator will not be on the 2022 dashboard simply because it's a composite indicator that makes use of a number of different measurements, one of them being our CASP system, which was on pause for the last number of years. So since there aren't sufficient data points for a full college and career readiness report on the dashboard this year, it's being excluded. In addition to those state measures, there's also 5 local measures which are called out as it relates to the local control funding formula priorities. Data for these measures is actually supplied by the district through our own reporting and narrative. So things like the basic conditions of priority 1, how well of a job the district is doing with implementation of academic standards in priority 2, school climate surveys as it relates to priority 6, parent involvement and family engagement in priority 3, and access to a broad course of study for priority 7. The only response that the state reports on the dashboard for these 5 local measures is met or not met. And since these relate to LCFF, they're only found on the district level dashboard. So you wouldn't have these represented if you drill down to an individual school's dashboard. So before getting a few more details, I wanted to kind of just give a bit more context as to what we're looking at here. So we have this video that's about 2 minutes long. It does an excellent quick summary. So please enjoy.
The world looks different today. A lot different. How we lived 2 years ago isn't the same way we live today. One thing remains the same. Our California public school students need support in and out of the classroom. That is why we are reintroducing the California School Dashboard, an online tool designed to assess what we can accomplish for students moving forward. You might say, wait, we've had a California School Dashboard before. Why did we pause it? First, let's talk about why we are here. The California School Dashboard launched 5 years ago, creating a new online system of reviewing the performance and progress of schools and districts. The dashboard was successful in showing how schools and districts were meeting the needs of California's diverse student population. However, the legislature suspended the statewide dashboard for 2 years at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and for good reason. In 2020, the pandemic changed everything we knew about how to educate students, and the federal government no longer required the traditional assessments. Year 2 was a roller coaster that went upside down and never seemed to stop. Chronic absences, an educator shortage, new variants, changing health guidelines, and social emotional wellness all had an impact on students. At a time when they needed normalcy, they got chaos. 2 years of distance learning and changing school conditions have been part of that chaos. Now we're getting a clearer picture of the puzzle that is student achievement. Generally speaking, California students suffered academically during the pandemic, and things can only get better from here. As you review the dashboard and the numbers attached to your school and school district, know that this is the new floor, our new baseline, our new starting point in delivering high-quality public education to our students. So what comes next? Your school community is focused on bouncing back from the lows brought on by the pandemic. School leaders have campaigned for support to address the learning gaps that are clear in the dashboard. The governor and state lawmakers listened. They've dedicated a historic amount of funding to assist in creating programs to improve student outcomes. Some of those programs are already up and running with the help from community engagement partners. Proof that the new education dollars won't go unused. It's a new day in California, and educators have one goal in sight: provide the support our students need to get back on track and become our next generation of inventors, organizers, artists, scientists, educators, and leaders. The world.
So I like how the video talks about a new baseline, and it's particularly relevant when we're talking about multi-year plans. The timeline in which that we're working on the LCAAC did not necessarily become interrupted by the fact that we had a pandemic. We have goals that are in place, established. However, we're having to be kind of in an interesting position of being able to pivot to a new starting point with what some of our important metrics are pointing to. So looking back to talk about the way information was expressed previously on the dashboard, I think I need to pause and talk about that for a quick moment so that the changes to this year's dashboard make the most sense. The dashboard was always a colorful website with these speedometer type style logos where performance was tracked from red to blue in colors. Performance was calculated not only based off of the current year or what's referred to as status, but also how much that needle was moved from the previous year, called the change data. So being that accountability across the state. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go ahead and give a quick example of one of the icons that was on our 2019 dashboard, the last year that we had a full comprehensive dashboard. We can see that for the academic indicator for ELA, we're given a performance ranking. In this case, it would be the highest performance. And also the actual performance level of, on average, how well our students are performing above or below a given standard. We can see that there's information of how much that increased from the previous school year. But like I said, since we don't have accountability data from the last years, we don't have that ability to call out change data. So the 2022 dashboard is only going to reference current year or status data from the 2021-22 school year. So unlike in previous iterations where you've got that wonderful range of colors, the 2022 dashboard is going to be fairly monochromatic with a whole bunch of purple. And school's performance level will be reported with what these look like cell phone signal bars with things ranging from very low to very high, but again, all within a single color. It should be noted that some of these graphs reverse depending on the type of indicator that you're looking for. We want our students to achieve at high levels academically, so we want a very high ranking for academic indicators. Our hope is that through behavioral lessons and supports, we have a very low suspension rate. So the icons shift depending on the type of indicator that you're looking at. Using an example, this is made up. This is not actual data from Fremont Unified, but it is visually representative of what would be seen on the dashboard's coming release. Is that we will see both a performance level ranging from very low to high, as well as what the current performance is above or below a certain metric. But there won't be any change data like the previous iterations of the dashboard. Looking over the next couple of years, status only, meaning purple is the only color for this year's dashboard, with the college career readiness indicator being completely absent. Moving to 2023, we'll again have current year and change data to look at. So we'll have colors reported for every indicator with the exception of the college and career readiness, which will be in basically this year's configuration. And it won't be until 2024 where the CDE predicts that we'll have again a color dashboard. So how is dashboard data useful in terms of drilling down to specific student groups that are obviously called out within the LCAAC. Let me just walk you through a few different graphics. Again, I'm having to use 2019 information, but hopefully the analogy of how we'll be able to drill down on the 2022 dashboard still comes through. So this is an example again of the academic indicator of English language arts. We're able to see district-wide for all students. Our district has a strong performance. On average, our students scored well above the standard for English language arts, and even compared to the previous year, it went up. That part of the data won't be available for this coming dashboard. However, all students don't perform at the same level when broken down by those same student groups that were initially called out. So within Fremont Unified, even though district-wide there was the strongest performance on average across the district, we know that student experience and student outcomes do vary. And so we can see here that in 2019, no student groups in Fremont scored in the red for ELA academics or in the orange level. However, our African-American students, Hispanic students, homeless students, Pacific Islanders, and those with disabilities had a relative lower performance than other student groups. Going down even further to look at, say, students with disabilities, we can say while a relative area of improvement within Fremont Unified, we also can be proud of ourselves that the student group within Fremont Unified is performing significantly higher than that of the state average. So we're able to compare not only our district to other student groups within our district, but then to state averages as well. Looking to English language learners, that again is the case where it is a relative area of needing to put supports to bring that student group up. But again, compared to state averages, Fremont Unified again has reason to be a proud district. And let's see here. I'm sorry, I think I missed one slide. I wanted to just make a quick note here that kind of drilling down doesn't work for the English learner progress indicator, because obviously this indicator is the only one that specifically looks to measure the progress of our students with language acquisition. Unlike the LCAAC exam, which students take annually to determine their language proficiency, which only has a score of 1, 2, 3, or 4, the English language progress indicator does have a difference between what it considers to be a low level 2 and a high level 2, or a low level 3 and a high level 3. So districts get credit for bringing a student's proficiency up by 1 ELPI level, or maintaining their performance at the highest level of LPAC level 4. Finally, just wanted to take a few moments to talk about differentiated assistance, which is what the state places districts in if they have a particular student group that performs at the very low rating in 2 or more priority areas. So for all purposes, very low on this purple dashboard will be the proxy for red as it relates to differentiated assistance. So one of these student groups that are called out on the left column would need to then place in the red or very low category in 2 or more of these priorities. Unlike in the past with priority 4 for the academic indicators of English language arts and mathematics, where a student group could be either scoring red in ELA and red in math, or red and orange in either of those. For the 2022 dashboard, for student group to be called out within priority 4 for academics, they would need to be red. In other words, a very low and low score for academics won't be at risk for that student group. So where has Fremont Unified in the past been for differentiated assistance? Well, back in 2017, the only student group that was in DA was our homeless students, and that was because they had red dash suspension and graduation rate indicators. 2018 saw the district move out of DA. That does not mean that there weren't individual student groups that had very low performance, but not across multiple priorities. However, in 2019, the last year of full public accountability, again, the student group of homeless students, but this time being in the red for 3 separate indicators: graduation rate, chronic absenteeism, and college and career readiness. So again, that visually is if a single student group falls within any 2 priority areas. So homeless was in DA for the district because of priority 5 and priority 8. I did want to kind of put up here at least just one last colorful graphic for us to look at, even though we won't have this type of data in 2022. Ultimately, we're able to create a larger picture of how our students in specific groups are doing across a broad range of metrics that go from not just academics, but also cover other areas of importance. And finally, if anybody is looking at individual school dashboards, I wanted to call this out. While none of the student groups previously across the entire district were small enough to warrant being removed from public reporting, some of these student groups may be small enough to not be reported publicly on the dashboard because, of course, we're needing to protect student anonymity and not release sensitive information. So while this is not necessarily relevant to the district's dashboard, when looking at individual school dashboards, if populations this year are smaller than 30 students, at a given site, no purple color performance level will be reported for them. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen, and happy to entertain any questions the committee may have, or
Mr. Lechner, go ahead.
Mr. Wasser, hi, and welcome to this committee. Thank you for your presentation. I was walking around with a big question mark in my mind for about 2 weeks because I read on some website not too long ago that the distance learning model that we practiced during the epidemic did not work so well. I personally thought that the Fremont District did a spectacular job. So is that reflected in the data? Is this, so this, the video that you showed us basically meant that that we could have done maybe some things differently, right? Is that what the...
You know, I very much appreciate hearing that comment. Going back to the little quick video that was shown, I know that towards the end, one of the statements in the video said, while students needed stability, they got chaos. And I do think that there's some validity to the statement that obviously if you're learning from your couch or bedroom or kitchen floor at home, that is a non-traditional learning environment. But I agree with your statement that given the challenges, what took place in Fremont Unified was wonderful. And that's supported currently by the public release of our SBAC results, where the dips in ELA and mathematics that we're seeing across the state weren't absent in our data, but certainly were not experienced at the same levels as students across the state. We are currently reviewing a state-provided internal review of 2 of the state measures of graduation rate and English learner progress. And it's predicted that next, or by the end of this week, the state will release to districts internally the opportunity to see their dashboard data prior to the comprehensive public release, which, crossing fingers, we're thinking sometime around December 15th. So we'll be able to answer or respond with greater certainty to your question, I think, at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Wasser, for your hard work. Great job.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Pelletier?
Hi, hello, Mr. Wasser. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you are projecting for the district to need to respond to the ongoing needs of homeless youth. You showed us some old data about the homeless youth in particular being a group that resulted in Fremont requiring differentiated assistance. And although I agree with Mr. Lechner that a lot of great things happened at the school sites during distance learning and during that return to in-person learning, along with students with disabilities, students who were homeless were especially hard hit during the pandemic because they did not have kitchen floors on which to learn, which I know you know. So with with CTE not being counted and with this 1 year of different type of data, is the district going to be moving forward as if those were still high priority monitoring areas, or are there other plans of action in place right now?
I immediately kind of, when I think about the obvious areas, obvious student groups that are needing supports, I think exactly what you said, that the pandemic impacted our groups in a disproportionate way. So being intentional with how supports are being rolled out most certainly is needing to take place. And ultimately, I think conversations often return back to what is happening academically, but for students who are with unstable housing, we know that there's associated trauma and stresses that go with that. And so a student needs to be supported in their health and emotional and mental well-being at the school site. So when talking about being intentional in the type of supports that are coming to sites, they are trying to honor that reality, in that there's no doubt that additional books, additional Chromebooks, new supplemental learning programs are beneficial, but so too are counselors, so too are support staff to help teachers address behaviors in the classroom. And so I think kind of in the same way that the dashboard tries to talk about multiple measures, what are supports within each of those larger categories that we can roll out, and then especially looking to see which student groups are needing the most assistance within those areas.
And Mr. Wasser, I can add, within the LCAAC, and that's something we all will also look at as we keep moving forward and looking deeper into the data. One of the areas we have is a focus is certainly the social emotional support We have a district homeless unhoused student liaison that's centralized at the district, supports students district-wide, but then additionally, each school that has a cohort of students that are identified by our director, Mr. Bailey, then does additional wraparound supports. What we have shared with our site administrators and as part of our work with MTSS, with our multi-tiered systems of support, which we will be also sharing with all of you as we continue to move with this work, is the prioritization of some of these students. Certainly in our expanded learning after school programs, if there's some wraparound there, because we have some other funds that we're using to leverage there. Certainly, through these funds, we have also leveraged intervention teachers at all of the elementary schools and prioritizing some of these same students for that targeted intervention and cycling through. So we're excited about the work that started in Fremont, but I think your point is really well taken, that we are going to have to just take a closer look at these student groups, because that's going to be the work of the LCAAC, right? And how we provide that. But thank you for that. I also want to share that once we were hoping to do a board presentation in December. It's still under embargo, but what we're going to do is right now we have it ready for January for our board to do our public presentation of the dashboard. And then we look forward to inviting Mr. Wasser back, if not in January with us, then in February, so we can actually look at our real data. But I think this was a really good kind of a show of what the next steps are in the state of California. Mr. Wasser just presented the same, pretty much similar presentation to our principals. And so although principals will say, oh, I know the dashboard, it's really looking different. And so it's a time to kind of recalibrate with them as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Well, this data will become very relevant as we get into the writing and the reviewing of the LCAP in the spring. For our new members, we're going to be looking at some data and some facts a little more at the beginning of the year before we kind of jump into what are going to be our priorities, what are the things we want to add, what are the things we want to evaluate. So that's kind of the trend, the schedule for us is to look in the spring and see what we want to do. And the last 2 years, we've done some pretty aggressive things with our budget that we're really proud of, and address some of the questions that were asked by members of the committee. So thank you. Okay. If there are, let me see, other questions. So we are now completed with the agenda. Are there any other things that are good for the good of the order? Yes, Ms. Salinas.
I just also wanted to preview the other work we will be doing is looking at our annual survey. And
Yes.
so with a district this size, we also know that many families really appreciate the flexibility of a survey. So we'll be bringing those questions forward for you all to take a look at in light of, we may pair it with the data once we have the data, and then for all of you to kind of look at last year's results and then see if we need to make some changes with the questions that we're asking of our community as well, so they can give further input.
Anything else for the good of the order?
I have a question about the availability of things like, for example, questions early. Will we receive copies of those early so that we can preview them, or do they typically come during the meeting? I noticed that in the agenda today, for example, we didn't get like copies of slides, which, the presentation was not Fremont's data. So, but I appreciate having time to preview things if that's possible.
Yes, we will. We definitely do that. We're compliant with the Brown Act, so we have as much details as we can, and we're compliant. And if we can get data, sometimes we'll even attach it after. But we make we're held. Well, I can just say yes. We will make every effort to try to get it there sooner than later.
Thank you. I've done plenty of my own Brown Act agenda, so thank you.
Yeah.
Also note that our community survey questions have been pretty consistent for the most part for several years. And so last year in LCAAC, we reviewed some historical trends of those. So those can be found in somewhere in the archives. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Okay. With that in mind, our next meeting is on January 10th, right after the winter break. If we don't see you before then, I hope everybody has a restful new year and start to January. We'll be back. So thank you very much for your time this evening.